I'm so excited about today's podcast. We have an incredible guest. The show has gone up about 40 notches in terms of songwriting experience today. We have brought in kind of a ringer for songwriting. He's like a legend in Nashville. His name is Terry McBride. He is the lead singer of McBride The Ride. He's also written songs for many other artists like Strait, Brooks and Dunn, Reba McEntire, Garth Brooks. I mean, it's like a who's who festival of songwriting, prowess, as he's gotten so many different songs cut by other artists. And the conversation with him is absolutely amazing. We talk about many different aspects of his career, and the fact that he is going to come here to Indianapolis, actually to Greenfield, to the H.J. Ricks Center for the Arts, and play a show on January 24th. The tickets are still on sale for that show. I'm going to open the show, which is a big, cool thing for me. But anyway, I think you should tune in right now and check out what is probably the coolest episode of Moonshine and Music.
You want to hear what a manatee sounds like?
Where I sing better if I am barefoot, and I don't have socks on right now.
Everyone knows my name, they can read it on my sleeve.
Played a banjo badly.
Feel the heat from the fire that's been burning in your heart.
Like, I love the old vintage stuff.
Somehow the 60 years and 19 days, they woke up in the dark.
We had to bury that stupid llama, and it took us forever.
How to make music happen, how to make it pretty, how to make it dissonant, and I learned how to sing through them.
Don't have babies with crazy people, cause they never go away.
And then you could take like 6 pennies and tape them to the arm, and it would ride over the wave.
All right. Welcome to Moonshine and Music. I'm Joe Shelton, and I'm the host. And we got a special guest today from Nashville. We got Terry McBride. I can't even pronounce things today, Terry. Terry McBride.
I'll help you.
From McBride The Ride. He's also a songwriter, one of the legendary songwriters in Nashville with big acts, Brooks and Dunn, Garth Brooks, Kenny Rogers, the King, George Strait, Reba McEntire. I mean, it's kind of a murderer's row of Nashville over the last 30 years. And he has written songs for all those folks, especially Brooks and Dunn. I think I noticed as I was like going back through and checking things out that Brooks and Dunn, you've written quite a few songs with Ronnie Dunn. I know those are like stuff you've done, but who's some of your songwriting heroes? And
gosh, that's a good question. You know, I grew up just outside of Austin, Texas. So when I was young, my dad was an artist, a singer, songwriter, really accomplished musician, great guitar player. So I had a lot of music in the home. I grew up around musicians, recording, reel to reel. My dad had a studio. So I looked up to my dad mainly as a young guy. I could see him working hard in his office, writing those songs and, rehearsing the band and recording. And so he was my big influence. But as I got a little bit older, I was really intrigued by Willie Nelson because this album, Shotgun Willie, came out when I was probably eighth grade. So it was one of my favorites. And so I was hooked. I was hooked on Willie. And then the album that followed was an album called Phases and Stages. It was a really interesting concept record about divorce. The wife's take is from one side of the album, the husband from the other. And it was just such an interesting, very sad, moving, but of course, well-written record because of Willie Nelson was such a craftsman. So really taken with Willie Nelson, and then course, knew of all the other songs he'd been writing. But those two albums in particular really changed the way I listened to music. I was in a band in high school, so I was very active playing music. I went on the road with my dad when I was 13, playing bass. So I got exposed to it early on, and then was fortunate to go from there to playing with people like Delbert McClinton, and got to tour with Stevie Ray Vaughan, and I got to do some wonderful things while living in Texas. But my heart was really in songwriting, so I started making those trips to Nashville, and then a lot of trips, a lot of rejection, and then eventually met a couple and a husband-wife songwriting team in Austin. They took me in, and they were having songs that Stevie Ray Vaughan had been recording. Crossfire, Willie the Wimp, and Fabulous Thunderbirds have been recording some of their music, and they just kind of took me in. They liked some songs that I'd been writing, these country songs, and they really just kind of stopped what they were doing, and I became their project for a while. We wrote these really cool songs, recorded a bunch of them in Austin, and then we made our way to Nashville, and that really opened the door once I had those songs. They were just better written and better produced, and they were just really cool because Bill Carter and Ruth Ellsworth were very cool. And they surrounded themselves, and myself included, with a lot of cool people in that Austin music scene, some wonderful players who ended up helping me with that music. And so that really started my path to getting me to where I wanted to go. I mean, we wanted a George Strait cut is what we wanted because we're from Texas,
Right.
So fortunately, I got signed to a record deal with MCA. Tony Brown signed me, and he created the band. I didn't know Billy or Ray, my partners, and McBride The Ride. He knew them. Ray was playing with Lyle Lovett, and Tony had just produced that first Lyle Lovett record. And then Billy was playing with Emmylou Harris, but Tony had used him on the Hillbilly Rock album. Billy played drums on that record, and he was using Billy to sing on those early Vince Gill records, which Billy Thomas, our drummer, has been playing with Vince Gill ever since, off and on for the last 30 years, and still does. And Ray still plays on all those Lyle Lovett records. So he brought us all together. I'd been playing with Delbert and left that band to form McBride The Ride. And then I was the primary songwriter for McBride The Ride, and got, some hits out of that. And then George Strait actually was the second song I ever had recorded, and kind of like a dream come true for me. And John Anderson was my first cut from a song from the soundtrack 8 Seconds, which we actually had the first single from that movie, The Lane Frost Story. 8 Seconds. We had the single called No More Crying, which kicked off the soundtrack for that movie. And we were in the movie. I tell people we're in the movie 8 Seconds for about 6 seconds, but it was quite an experience.
I've watched that probably 10 times.
So much fun. We're just in there for a second, Joe, at the National Finals Buckle Award ceremony, where Luke Perry is playing Lane Frost, and then the camera pans to us, momentarily for our little bit of the clip of the song that they were helping and wanting to promote for the soundtrack. But it was a thrill. We got to film with Stephen Baldwin and Luke all day. It was about a 16 hour shoot for our little 6-second piece in there. It's kind of the way the movie business is. It's slow progress, slow process, but it was thrilling to be involved in it, even the small part that we were.
I mean, you talk about that, but I feel like recording music is similar. I mean, when you're really trying to get something together, you can spend an entire day with, 12 seconds of solo where you're just trying, or you're just trying to fix something or get it in there, or, it just isn't right. Try it again, that kind of thing. Right.
Oh man. Yeah. Studio going into it prepared will help. That's what we used to do with, McBride The Ride. We had a lot of pre-production before we ever got to the studio, because we knew that time was valuable. Back in the day, you couldn't repair and punch and replace everything. It had to be in tune, because there was no way to tune it back when we first started recording. You had to be on, and it had to be, a good performance. So we really we had the luxury of trying out a lot of our music on the road first before we ever got to the studio. But today you can do whatever you want. You can spend as much time or as little as you want, going into it. But having a good song is still where it starts. You've got to have that, or you can spend all day just trying to make something, out of nothing and end up with not much if you're not careful. But I still can get inspired by a great song, and usually that helps with studio musicians as well. They've done so much work that they can spot and sense a good song when it's starting to come together, and that really can light a fire under a great musician.
Yeah, the studio musicians to me, even in Nashville, they're amazing, and I've worked with a couple of them there. But like up here, even in Indiana, there's studio musicians around, and they're just amazing guys because they've recorded 50, 75 albums or whatever. So as they hear a song, they like, well, this will work. Let's try that, and it's incredible.
Yeah,
right.
Like experience comes in handy in that situation for sure. Yeah, a great guitar player like back in the day, Brent Mason. He could create the entire hook guitar lick for Alan Jackson or whoever you were listening to, Brooks and Dunn as well. I was witness to a lot of that in the studio, being fortunate to write some of those Brooks and Dunn hits. We'd see it go down from our little work tape on the bus. We'd take that into the studio, play it for these musicians, and you could see the wheels starting to spin, and they would go into the studio and sort of give their take on what we were trying to do. And we might even be humming a lick and not even playing it. And then they could take it on from there and turn it into something really special. I witnessed that many times. It's pretty exciting to see it start to take place.
Yeah, I was fortunate enough to live in Nashville for a little while and watch some of those folks do that. And the amazing thing to me is to watch how really talented folks are when they're shooting a music video. Like we did one with Pam Tillis one time, and she was singing like to lip sync basically, but she was really singing.
Oh yeah.
And she's in the room just singing along to that thing, and they'd cut the music off to cut, and she'd be singing, and you'd be like, just perfect pitch, just like right,
Yeah, she's a pro. She's been doing that for quite a while. And she's great. I love Pam, and she's still active and out there singing and playing today.
Yeah, she's. I worked on the video where they were an American Bandstand. When you walk in the room. And I had to get together all of those props for that. That was like my.
Sounds like a cool idea. Yeah.
Yeah, and I got to talk to Dick Clark on the phone, which was crazy.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Yeah. This is like my big Nashville story.
That's
talk to Dick Clark.
That's a legendary moment there for sure.
Well, you answer the phone, and he's like, "This is Dick Clark," and you're like, "Oh my God, it is Dick Clark." I can tell by the,
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. They always produced those ACM awards back in the day, so early on ran into him a few times, and his son took over, after Dick had some health problems and whatever. But
and you were nominated for an ACM, right?
We were nominated for new group of the year. I think that was 92. Us, Diamond Rio and Brooks and Dunn that year.
Yeah.
And then CMA that year
to be in right there. I mean,
that was tough. Brooks and Dunn took it all that year. They'd sold about 7 million copies. I think we sold about 7. I don't know, but it was tough to compete with those guys. But it's kind of where I first met Kix and Ronnie, and then later we had a number one single called "Sacred Ground" that Kix co-wrote that song. So really met Kix at the number one party, which is a great way to meet a guy if you're going to meet him. But so we always hit it off, and it was later that I met Ronnie. But then Ronnie became my writing partner for 13 years or so. I spent with those guys just on the road. We still write some to this day, but not on the road with them like I was back in the day. I actually played in the band the last 3 years. Played bass with them after being out there for 10 years, and they finally put me to work. I got tired of me eating that catering for free, and they put me on the payroll, which was it was a lot of fun. We had so much fun during that period. That was about 96 to 2010. It was a good run.
Yeah,
to say the least.
I believe that I probably I know that I went to see them in like 2009 in Cincinnati. And the the riverfront part, or the river
you bet
park, or whatever it is. Yeah.
I was in the band at that point. I was playing bass.
Yeah, and I remember that night because Ronnie was a little ill, and so Kix sang most of the night, and it was really cool because I had seen him a couple times, but most of the time it's like half and half, But that night was like about 80% Kix, and that was really neat because there were so many, so many album cuts that came out because,
Yeah. Well, and Kix had a bunch of hits, too. People forget
Yeah.
Rock My World and You Better Kiss Me and Lost and Found, Border Town. Kicks had a bunch of hits early on there. Then Ronnie kind of had the bulk of it towards the end there for whatever reason, but he became the voice there. But
I was going to say that my favorite, like you, I know you Play Something Country, but you also wrote one of my favorites of theirs, or two of them actually, that aren't big songs of theirs. They're the ones that I pulled out of, I'm a guy who pulls an album cut and just loves it.
Sure.
Like Just Another Neon Night and I May Never Get Over You. Those are two. Man. I love both of those.
Neon Night. I always liked that song. Yeah, that was, we had a good time writing that song. Yeah, I May Never Get Over You. I think that was a single. No, maybe it wasn't. No.
Yeah, it's been played a lot.
Yeah. No, I don't think that was a single. I think I had 13 singles with those guys, so it was a heck of a run.
I never understood why Just Another Neon Night didn't get a single, because that song kicks ass, man. It's like powerful.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. Good, cool storylines in there too about getting ready for the Saturday night kind of thing.
I love that line. Billy's got a 40 in a brown bag.
Yeah,
just hearing that, like I know that guy. You know what I'm saying? Like that guy is brown. You know what I'm saying? Like
I had to convince Ronnie that people would know what that was. He goes like, "You think people will know what that is?" I said, "Oh yeah, man. If you've ever bought a 40-ounce beer, it comes in a brown bag usually.
Yeah, totally. Because you just buy one if you're getting a 40.
I had to talk him into that. It's like, I don't know. I said, "Yeah, man, you got to get down here with the real people."
Yeah, man, that line right there, it's like I feel like the party has started when he walks up with the 40 in the brown bag, And
it's funny you mentioned that. I think I'm playing acoustic guitar on that song.
Yeah.
Ding da doo ding da doo ding da doo. They had the amazing Brian Sutton, who's just a phenomenal session acoustic player, but he was such a precise, perfect player. They needed somebody to play it more loose and sloppy, like a songwriter would do it. So that was my cue to come in and play. I got to play on that record.
That whole album that's my favorite Brooks and Dunn album. I like, it's got Play Something Country on it, and I think it's Hillbilly Deluxe, right?
Is that Hillbilly Deluxe? Yeah.
And I love Hillbilly Deluxe as well. But like at that time, it was like when that one came out, I was driving back and forth downtown to work every day, stuff, and I just like every morning I was like turning that, because it was like all these upbeat, like kick-ass country songs.
That's about the time you probably saw the band in Cincinnati. It was probably about 2009 or so when that album came out.
Yeah, it was about that time,
or maybe a little before that, I guess. Maybe just a little before that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it came out right, maybe the year before it or whatever. But yeah, it was. Yeah, that was a great album, and I love those songs. And I actually play I May Never Get Over You in my set sometimes as a cover.
Cool.
Because it's like one of those ones that like, people kind of know it, and they just like that. And then after, it's one of those ones where they ask me, is that yours after?
I May Never Get Over You. Yeah, Ronnie sang the heck out of that, like he did with most songs we wrote. We'd start that. I just found there was this little, Sony made a little mini disc man. Briefly, it was a cool little invention. It was between the CD and the cassette, and we all had those little Sony cassette players that we would record on the road. We'd take them with us, and they sort of bumped it up and created this little mini disc Walkman type thing.
Right, I remember those.
It was really cool because it almost had like a little compression. It recorded through the headphones, almost like in stereo. I mean, it just created a cool sound. And I just found my mini disc by going through some old stuff here at this little studio that I have. And we plugged it in and it fired up. I couldn't believe it. Probably been sitting since 2010, maybe longer, But on it was a song that Ronnie and I were on the bus, and it was I Keep On Loving You, that we wrote, that Reba McEntire cut. But it's us on the bus we're working it out. There are 4 versions of it: the early version, the middle version, and then the final version of it.
Man, that's super cool. I mean,
it sounds so good, Joe. You can hear the bus generator humming in the background, so I can tell we're on the bus.
Wow, that sounds like. Do you know Tennille Towns? She has an album out where she recorded it on a train, and you can hear.
Oh, did she really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
You can hear the train in the background. Like, she did this show where it was like they did like 30 stops along a train track in Canada.
Oh, cool.
And she was recording an album during it, and you can hear the train, like, chugging along and stuff in the background on the tracks, like when it gets quiet.
Wow. Oh, that's a cool idea. Great idea.
It's a really cool record. I don't know if you've heard it or not. You might check it out, but
yeah, I know her as the artist, but I haven't seen or heard that record. But I'll look for it.
Yeah, it's there's a song on it called "Home to Me" that I really like on there. Well, we have a lot of songwriters on our show, and a lot of them that listen to the podcast consequently. And I was wondering if you have like advice for them in this era. How to get started on writing songs and maybe make a break in or any of that.
Wow. Boy, it's a crazy time for songwriters. I mean, it's really a transitional period from the old to the new, from what used to be the business of writing songs was part of your income, if you were successful, could come from record sales. That's pretty much off the table now. It doesn't really exist anymore. If you had a big Brooks and Dunn or George Strait cut, I could pay some bills and maybe buy a car even, on a good George Strait cut, just because he sold so many copies at Walmart or wherever,
Right.
That doesn't really exist anymore. Streaming is just such a small piece of any kind of income you could make these days. So you really basically have to hope to have a song on the radio. Performance money is still king. It still pays well if you have a hit, but that's only about 50 songs a year, basically, maybe less, depending on, how many songs make it to the top or in the middle or whatever. There are a few hundred songs that get on the radio each year, but the big songs are the ones, of course, that make all the money. But that's still a great way, because that money, performance money, basically goes to the songwriter. It doesn't go to the label. It doesn't go to the artist. It goes primarily just to the creators of the music, the song. So it's a tough business to be in. It always was. Nashville is not an easy place to just, you can say you're going to be a songwriter, but Nashville doesn't need a bunch of good songs. It was built on a lot of great music. When I came to town, Harlan Howard was still holding court, and these legendary, songwriting giants that I looked up to were all basically still alive, from Roger Miller to Willie Nelson to, like I said, Harlan Howard to Jackie Ward to the list goes on and on. Dean Dillon, some pretty legendary songs writers, and so the bar was set pretty high by those guys. So when I came naively, bouncing into town trying to sell my songs and take Nashville by storm, I got sent home pretty much with my tail between my legs, realizing I wasn't prepared and I wasn't ready. Even though I was a musician and I'd been playing quite a while, my craft of songwriting, it just hadn't come together yet, really not until I met Bill and Ruth. Like I mentioned earlier, the songwriting couple in Austin that took me in, they elevated my level of songwriting. And really things started happening. Then I started getting opportunities to write with Guy Clark and some of my heroes and people like that. It changed quickly, and mainly because I had a record deal. It wasn't that all of a sudden I was the best writer in town. I just had an opportunity, and songwriters love an opportunity. I was a guy with a record deal, so I could get in the door. My label helped me, and I took advantage of it because I was such a fan of all these people I was getting to hang out with. It was kind of mind-blowing, very intimidating, but I learned a lot and kind of was fortunate to hold my own most of the time, and kept moving forward and getting these songs. But I mean, to answer your question, you've just got to, it's got to be something that's driving you as strong as anything else in your life, to want to create music, to write music. It's something you almost have to do daily to practice and hone your skills and become better at it. You've got to research, you've got to listen to other music, you've got to really be smart about how you're writing it, and you've got to really be true to yourself in what you're writing about, or it just ends up sounding like a bunch of other music you've heard. If you can draw from your experience, if you can write about something you really know a little bit about, or a feeling, or just be bold enough to put it on paper, then you already are going to be a little bit different than just the average Joe. You just can't come to town sounding like, Morgan Wallen or whatever, although there's a lot of that happening. And that's part of the downside to our business is once something takes off, then there are about a lot of copies of it that are going to come. We went through a lot of years of the bro country where everybody was chasing that certain sound, and certain subject matter and storyline. It was all just about the same, except just sort of mixed a little differently for whatever artist, But I mean, good gosh, we talked about and sang about bonfires and tailgates. And I mean, that went on so much longer than I thought it would. But, back in the day, it still was a lot of love and heartache and beer drinking. But I don't know. We got stuck for a while with this certain sound. And so something fresh would really have a chance. If you could bring something fresh to whoever you're playing it for, then you might have a shot. I think that's what really opened the door for me. I was in Austin. I wasn't in Nashville. So by the time I brought these songs to Nashville, our producer, Tony Brown, he liked it because it sounded a little different. It wasn't like every demo. One, we weren't using any of the players from here. It was a whole different band.
Right.
We were fortunate that we were recording it in a wonderful studio called Arlen Studios in Austin, Texas. So we had a great facility we were tracking in, but we were slanting it a little different because we weren't being told what to do, and we didn't really know what we were doing. We were just trying to cut country music, so there were no rules and no box to put us in, and that's really what made Tony Brown perk up and take an interest in me and my songs. He just thought it was really different. It didn't sound like everything else, and things started moving pretty quickly after that. He flew to Texas and I had a meeting with him. He's like, man, I'm going to sign you to the label and I love what you're doing. And I was like, oh my gosh. I
mean, it's got to be a little intimidating with someone like Tony Brown, who didn't he play piano for Elvis?
Yeah.
It's that, he's that lineage, right? Like,
oh man.
I mean, I don't know. I don't know him at all, but it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, he was in the Stamps, right? Like one of the bands that backed all this. Yeah.
He was in the band. He was in a band that opened for Elvis on every show called The Voice.
Oh, okay.
And that was part of the Stamps quartet. He was also in the Oak Ridge Boys. He was a piano player, Yeah. He's been a friend since the day he signed me, the day we met, which is the thing I love about Tony. It wasn't just a business deal with me. It became personal. We had dinner with him right before Christmas. He just turned 78 years old.
Oh, wow.
And
that dude's life is incredible. I mean, I know he's produced so many big artists. He didn't do Winona and
her big breakout solo records. The first album he did for George Strait was Pure Country. He did all of the Vince Gill records, all of the Marty Stewart, Steve Earle from Guitar Town to Copperhead Road, all those big Reba, Fancy. He had 100 number one singles as a producer. It just goes on and on and on. I mean, he's an amazing guy. He hates that he's getting older. His glory days are kind of behind him now, but it would be hard to ever match the career that he's had. It's
right.
Just,
that's amazing. I mean, it's amazing when you look back and you've just piled up something like that. And I mean, it's incredible that he found you and took you. It's really cool.
I'm so thankful. Joe, when I was living out in Lubbock, Texas, starving for a while, I kind of bounced around from Lubbock to Austin and a friend of mine out there, I was cutting some demos and he really liked it. And so we took some pictures. We sent it to MCA. And then I got a rejection letter from Tony Brown. It was on the letterhead MCA. Unfortunately, your music doesn't quite fit where we're headed. It was a standard rejection. I was so excited because Tony was my number one producer. Everything he was doing, I loved, from Steve Earle to that La Love It record. He had produced some of those Patti Loveless records that I love. Steve Wariner. Everything that I kind of liked as a young guy, he was involved with it. And then when I got to know him, it was pretty mind blowing. He was like a rock star to me. Next thing I know, he's taking me to lunch and I remember I came up to Nashville. He's like, man, I got to go to LA. Just take my Mercedes and just use it while I'm gone. I was like, oh my God. I'm driving around Nashville. I'm doing donuts in Tony Brown's Mercedes. It's like, but it was pretty mind blowing. But I realized,
does he know you were doing donuts in his Mercedes? He might still be a little bit upset.
not until he sees this podcast, Joe. He doesn't really know.
Well, if he sees my podcast, I will be just floored. That will be so amazing.
Yeah. Who knew? I was already drifting way before that was popular. Who knew that would be popular back in the day? Yeah,
right. I mean,
no, but I could
totally
tell
what I would do with his Mercedes. By the way, if he had done that, yeah.
I just had a connection with him from our very first meeting when we met, and then we had Mexican food, and then we just hit it off, like a personal connection, more so than business. And he's been kind of my advisor and one of my supporters. I mean, early on, he's like, man, you're writing good stuff. You got to keep at it. You got to keep with it. And here's somebody you should be writing with, and you need to get with this guy. This producer's great. And he was really instrumental in me doing a lot of what I was doing as far as songwriting and the artist, for him. He was very supportive. Whether he produced or not, he didn't even care. He just was really supportive of me and what I was trying to do. And he still is. I mean, he's still pulling for me. He tried to get George to cut a song on this last album because after all these years, Tony produced this last record, and he had a song he really wanted George to cut, and he just didn't do it. He was disappointed for me, And I said, well, we all want a George Strait cut. Fortunately, I've had a couple, but he's still that way, still a supportive guy. Love him for that.
I'll write whatever George wants for his record.
Yeah. Yeah. George is tough. I've had a couple good cuts, and I've had several where all the way down to the studio, and a couple of them didn't make it. It's heartbreaking because it's George Strait, I mean, it's
well, I'm sure he gets the pick of the litter too. I mean,
oh yeah,
everybody's writing a song that they'd love to have George Strait cut. And,
there are a lot of great writers that have never had one because he's very selective about what he likes to sing and what he does, And so my first cut was the Jim Lauderdale song. He loved Jim, and then he got to be a fan of songs I was writing. He had me come in one year and sing his Christmas album for him because he didn't want to come to Nashville and do it. He told Tony, get Terry and have him do it. And so I did. He paid me. He sent me a personal check. Wow. Almost didn't cash it because he had his George Strait on it, but it was more than I could keep at the time. But I've had a crazy kind of relationship with him, but
now you'd be able to keep the check and just take a picture of it and send it to the bank on your phone.
Yeah,
right?
Good point. Yeah. I know it. I should have at least taken a photo of it.
But back then, well, I mean, now you can cash a check with your phone, right? Like,
you don't even have to. Exactly. Yeah, I could keep it. I wouldn't even have to take it.
You could frame it.
Yeah, dang it.
Put it up.
I'd love to have had it. I would love to have framed it just because it had his signature on it and he signed it, or maybe his wife might have signed it from their account, but it was from his personal account.
That's pretty crazy. That's really cool. I mean,
yeah, it was good. Tony produced that record, so it was a lot of fun. They were doing all traditional songs, and it was a lot of fun. I had to kind of sing in that George Strait vibe, which I could kind of morph into that a little bit when I knew I was going to. Our other song was called Always Never the Same. It was the title of George's album, and I did my best George Strait for that track for sure. And he really loved that song. Thought it was going to be the first single, and it was going to be the first single and the title of the album. And then some programmer somewhere did not like the song. He's like, man, I don't like that song. It reminds me of a Jim Lauderdale song, whatever. And it went from first single to no single, which was such a bittersweet moment. I've got the George Strait cut. I've got the title of the album that I just lost the first single, all in the same fatal moment. It always just came from the mountain to the highs and lows of the business are incredible. And that was one of those moments where I could barely enjoy the highs for the devastating lows of losing out on that single,
I can't even imagine. I mean, I can't imagine. It sounds great. I've lost out on a lot of George Strait things. Not gotten any.
Well, just the being able to say you've had a single is just something that's just amazing, and then
Right.
then there's the financial side of it that's really devastating. If you take that off the board of what I know that single would have made, oh boy, you just got to pick yourself up and move on and be glad you got the cut and go on from there, which is exactly what I had to do. I couldn't just wallow in my self-pity for very long. I had to pick myself up and move on.
Well, I mean, in this day and age, when you put out songs, as you were talking about streaming earlier, like guys like me and my friends, we put out music and out there on all these services. And,
Sure.
If you are fortunate enough to get enough just to make back the money you spent on the record, then you can make another one, right? That's our goal.
Yeah.
As we do whatever
It's
we're doing,
tough.
right? And,
That's tough.
so it's when you're figuring that out now, do you feel like there's going to be a new structure for how money can be made in the industry? I mean, with the knowledge that these streaming services, they just aren't going to pay very well based on how much they get paid. I mean, if it's only $10 a month to have all the songs in the world, then you split that up, you're not going to get very much money, no matter how many plays you get, right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's, and unfortunately the songwriter is kind of always the last one in the room. I don't know why, but it's like, it goes all the way back to when Edison invented the tube that they used to play, before there were even records.
Yeah.
They had a tube, that you would insert and it would spin. So when they're figuring all this out, they're like, well, we got to pay Edison something. We got to pay the manufacturer of the tube something. Who owns that? And then somebody mentioned, what about the guy that wrote the song? And they went, oh, dang, we got to give him something too. But, it was like a penny of the dollar. And that kind of where it stayed with that sort of thought and that sort of structure for a long time until finally we have NSAI here in Nashville. There's sort of they represent songwriters and they go to Congress all the time on our behalf. And they were a big proponent and a part of getting the capital gains tax reduced, because for years an individual like me, if I wanted to sell my catalog, they were going to charge me 40% capital gains to sell it, which that was the norm for years. And they finally got that down to around 25%, sort of like a company would have to pay. But for some reason we weren't considered, worthy of that. I don't know why, but so they're still working on streaming platforms. They're going to bat and trying to get some of these percentages changed a little bit, but it's going to be a long process. There's a lot of money being made on these streaming platforms, but it's just not trickling down to the songwriter. And crazy as it is, a lot of labels didn't even see it coming, but now they end up with the lion's share because whoever has the master, is the one that's going to get paid first, and the bulk of the streaming is going to go to them. So like an independent artist like us, yes, we do own the masters now. We do split a portion of that with a little label that we are connected to, but we're also an older act. So we don't have all that young streaming eyes on our music and ears like some artists do. We have been growing, and that is encouraging because we are sort of new. We just got back together about 4 years ago. So we are in the process as far as socials and everything. We're continuing to see some improvement and growth, which is a little business. That's all you can hope for, and that's kind of what we are. We're back in business after all these years and trying to do what we can to create some interest out there and still have fun with it and still bring some good music to the table. That's what it's really all about. I'm going to go in this year and cut a few things on my own solo. I enjoy going out and doing these solo shows, which is what we were talking about earlier, which is why I'm coming to Greenfield. I'm in Terre Haute the next night with Colin Ray, opening for Colin. And I do a lot of that. Been with Doug Stone, and I do a lot of singer-songwriter storytelling, the song, stories behind the songs. People love that sort of thing. And I really enjoy doing it. I can do a 90-minute show, and I can do whatever I want. I can sing some McBride The Ride stuff. I can do those Brooks and Dunn songs. I enjoy doing that. A couple Willie Nelson things and talk about Willie a little bit. But that's kind of what my show will consist of in Greenfield. When we have the show there, it'll just be a variety of songs I've written, songs that have inspired me, and some stories kind of behind them, and a little look at my days on the road with Brooks and Dunn, and the how some of those songs came together, which a couple of those are really interesting, how they almost didn't come together, and especially the duets with Reba McEntire. If you see him, if you see her, and Cowgirls Don't Cry, those both have sort of an interesting story how they came to be. But
well, I can't wait to hear those stories. That's going to be fun. I mean, I'm really thrilled to be able to open for you at the Rick's Theater on. It's going to be January 24, and
right.
If people are listening and they haven't got their tickets yet, they're available for sale. The link will be in the show notes. And I think that Bubba and Friends are also playing a little set before.
Oh, cool.
And cool. So it's going to be a real fun night. And the theater, Terry, I know you asked about it before we started recording. The theater is beautiful. They just redid all the seats in there last year, so that's brand new, comfortable seats for everybody to sit.
Nice.
It's not a huge theater, 350 seats. But when you walk in there, you just feel the vibe, and the sound is absolutely beautiful. It sounds
that's great.
Wonderful. Like you could sing in there just without any amplification, and everybody could hear you. But of course,
that's great.
Sound system in there. So
love those little theaters. We have one here in Franklin where I'm playing this year, and it's like that. It's 300 seats. They bring a really eclectic lineup of some really cool. Almost every night of the week here, they have somebody, but those are the best. Smaller crowds, I've played those big stadiums, and we've had so much fun over the years, but some of the best shows ever, and this is the truth, are those little theaters and sometimes listening rooms with no more than 100 people. It can just be so much fun for everybody. It's more personal. With these shows, I can take my time. I don't have to rush through anything, and I kind of play off of the audience and get a feel for where the set is going to take me. I let the crowd sort of take me where I feel it needs to go. And I'm really looking forward to it. And sounds like a fun night. It's wonderful. I'm bringing my front of house guy with me just because he's wonderful and knows what I do well. But we're prepared.
They have a great sound system built into the theater, so the sound will be good. It's
fantastic.
The podcast actually sponsors some shows there each year. And so the people that watch here are familiar with some of those because we actually film the shows and put them on our YouTube channel. But it's
cool.
It's just a great venue. I always love playing there, and it's in my hometown, and so that's really good too.
Fantastic.
It makes it easy.
Well, bring your friends and neighbors and family, pack them all up, and bring them on in. And
we're working on it. We're going to drag them in by their hair, by their neck, whatever we got to do to get them there, Terry. We've
got some people already that have bought some tickets, and appreciate that. And I've had some people reach out about meet and greets, and I usually sign and meet everybody after the show. I go back out to the lobby or wherever the merchandise is, and love visiting with people. I've got a couple of fans, big time fans, that have already been very vocal about this show and have been wanting to see me for years, and so I'm excited about that. That's the big payoff for me on these shows, is just getting to meet these people who are passionate about these songs from 30 plus years ago. That is the best part of the small show. Like, even if you do a meet and greet, like it's with somebody in an arena show, because I've done that before, it's like you get like 5 seconds to say hi, because there's a line from here to Timbuktu, right? Sure. But at this kind of thing, people actually might get to talk to you for a minute, say hi, and Oh, for sure. Oh yeah. I've always make that a part of the show. I don't think I've ever played a show personally that I haven't come out front and met everybody. It's and everybody's so kind, and it's a win-win because they've enjoyed the show. I mean, hopefully that's usually the case, and they're surprised that I can still sing and remember all these songs, which it's always a good feeling when I know I've been able to do that myself. But I'm still enjoying it and still have fun with it. And like I said, meeting the fans is a big part of that.
I won't be surprised that you can still sing. I've heard you. You got that down. You're in good shape there, buddy.
I hope so. I've been taking pretty good care of myself over the years. I finally got my act together. It took me about 50 years, but finally I've almost figured it out. But yeah, I still enjoy singing. And
is it because you got like an app that tells you you're in tone or not?
Yeah. Well, I've been working on my equipment, my gear, my guitar. I've added a new guitar to my arsenal this year. I'll probably bring a couple for this show, but I do have a great new guitar.
What's the new guitar? What are you playing?
This new guitar, it's called a Murphy Lab guitar. It's a J45. It's not a relic, but it is an aged replica of a 1942 Banner Gibson J45. That Tom Murphy does this aging process to these guitars. He started with electrics for Gibson, and now he's morphed over into acoustics. And what he does with them is pretty amazing. It's really like a custom shop guitar, but he also ages the guitar, the wood, the finish, all of it. It's all checked and looks like it's a guitar from 1942, but I just don't have to carry a 1942 guitar around the country in a flight case or
Right.
I check those guitars a lot. It's kind of nerve wracking, but so it's a wonderful sounding guitar. I've always wanted the J45. I have a Jumbo, a J200. It's just such a big guitar. It sounds big. It's great. I wanted to move into something different. I've had a little Eric Clapton I played for a long time, and then I have a 63 Martin classical 0018 that's a beautiful, wonderful guitar. I sort of do my Willie Nelson tribute on that little guitar. I love it, and I'll probably have that guitar with me as well. But and then I have all kinds of pedals and things I've been messing with. I'm still updating and just got a couple new DIs, and just I'm always experimenting. But I have it down to where it sounds really good now.
I mean, I'm a guitar guy. You can probably see in the background there. I got like a rack of them behind me here.
Yeah.
You mentioned the J45, and my mother, for my 50th birthday, she calls me up and says, why haven't you got a Gibson? And because I had posted a picture online of one of my guitars, and I said, well, yeah, I want a J45, but I just, it's too much money for me right now, and she's like, she says, well, okay, well, which one would you want? Send me a picture. And I sent her this picture, and on my birthday, a delivery from Sweetwater comes, and it's a J45, and
killer.
And so that thing's never leaving my house because it's so sentimental. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I know that feeling. Yeah, guitars, it's a personal thing when you find one you love. I have my dad's guitars. So he passed away in 92, but I have a 335. I have an Epiphone Casino he bought new in 67. That's one of my favorite guitars. It's the John Lennon guitar,
Right, yeah.
And I have some of his amps, an early Bassman. I have a D18 that was his from 68. And I use those a lot, especially the Epiphone. I rarely ever do a songwriting session where I don't have it in the room. And I have a writing date coming up with Pat Monahan. Do you know who that is?
From, Train.
Yeah, Pat. I've never met him, but he's coming over to this little studio I have, and next week. To write, so I'm sure I'll have that guitar then. Also, got David Lee Murphy the next day, and so I have a whole little arsenal here as well of just guitars. This Wurlitzer my dad bought new. This is a 1962. It's a 145, an amazing piano. My grandmother had it for 30 plus years, and then it went missing.
And it's got Johnny Cash sitting on it, which is never a bad thing.
Yeah. That's a tribute show for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in Cleveland that I was part of. It was an amazing evening, and I just kept that. That's part of the program from that series. But that was wonderful. The State Theater in Cleveland that night had all kinds of people from the Oak Ridge Boys to Paul Coffin to I forget who. Mike Ness from Social Distortion was there, and it was a cool night. Fun evening.
I mean,
but this little piano is beautiful. It's the little bell chimey Wurlitzer from back in the day, like Ray Charles recorded on early on. It's for a guy and somebody who likes to play piano. It's nice to have it in the room, and those kind of things help when you're writing. Sometimes, just to inspire and a creative person. I like having guitars, and if somebody wants to pick one up, a
And
different
that's
sounding one.
Super 55 mic behind you as well. You got
Yeah, that is.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I've got a U87 here. That's an old mic. That's my vocal mic that I use for a lot of stuff. I've got that over on the big boom stand here, just to the left of me. But yeah, I've got a lot of gear and stuff here that I use. But I love stuff like that. That not only is it collectible and cool, but I get to use it. That's the best part of it.
It's always best when you get to use it. That's what I think.
Yeah, for sure. I've invested in a few pieces over the years just because it's stuff that I know. Like this new guitar, just taking on the road. I think it's important. I was telling somebody, I go on the road. One of us has got to be in tune, me or my guitar. At least I can count on my guitar for most of the time. But it's important. That was a pretty substantial investment, that guitar. But it's something I believe in what I'm doing, and it's the tools of my trade, so to speak. And so I've been blessed to have some guitars given to me, and some inherited, and then some that I've purchased myself. So, but I love that J45. It's it's a big guitar. It's loud.
Oh yeah, the J45. I was surprised at how loud it was when I got it out of the box, and when the sustain on it is incredible. It's almost like an electric guitar, just acoustic in the room. Which is kind of, I have a Martin D16, which is probably what I'll play the night that I come to the show there. But when I hit that J45, I mean, the sustain on it's like 10 seconds longer than the,
Yeah, they've got those dialed in. They learned a lot from those early models. That's kind of what this Murphy lab is all about. They took the best, the knowledge that they have, the best pieces and parts of those guitars that work. They've added a couple bracings and things that they know that can help with sustain and, to help them resonate or whatever. The wood quality is age. They go through a whole process with this Murphy guitar just to, and they charge you for it too, but it's interesting what they do. They've had a lot of success. Is part of the reason why, though. That guitar was really recommended to me by a couple amazing guitar players here in town, and so I really went down the rabbit hole on it a little bit, and then I tried several of them, and then I found this one that's really kind of special. And but yeah, it makes it fun to play at night for sure. If that's what you're doing, that means a lot for a guy. Just me and my guitar, that's all there is. So I wanted
as long as you don't piss off the band, it'll all be all right, right?
Now with McBride The Ride, I'm the lead singer, but I play bass in that band. Totally different. It's a totally different experience, totally different type of setup for me. I'm singing, but I'm playing a totally different instrument. But it's something I grew up doing. My dad was the guitar player, so he made me a bass player early on. I was about 13, 12 years old when I got my first bass, and then I kind of went on the road with him a little bit in junior high, and then lucked into this cool band in high school all the way through high school, and then back on the road with my dad out of high school. My dad was having some success. He was having some charted singles from a little independent label out of Nashville, and we had our own tour bus and had a cool recording studio my dad had built, and so I was deep into the whole music scene, just by within my own family, which is pretty cool because my dad was so knowledgeable and so accomplished as a player. He could write notation. We would have a string ensemble come and maybe play on a jingle or a project, and my dad would write all the string parts by hand. He was very knowledgeable and could answer any question I had. I only wish I'd asked him more questions. Now he's been gone all these years. I miss having that person who could really explain, chords and notes and keys and sharps and flats and all that wonderful stuff that makes up music,
Yeah, that's what I have. Like I have that on my wall back there. This is like my music theory chart back here.
Oh yeah. Yeah. He was a walking
Like
encyclopedia
yeah.
of musical information. He could play it and do it structure from jazz to swing to Scotty Moore, Elvis. He could cop all that, all those great licks, and stylistically he could really mix it up. And a lot of times when I would play with my dad, he had everything charted out. We'd do an hour of just dance music of old standards, uh, Cherry Blossom Pink, Tangerine, these old classic songs. But he had it all charted out. So as a bass player, I just had to read the chart, these 3, 4 pages sometimes. But I'd take the coda, or I'd take the first ending, go back to the coda. He taught me how to read those early on, and then he got into the number system after that, and made things very simple. But he had chart books for everybody in the band. There was a period where he was on the road hiring trios, so he had to have everything written out: keyboards, drums, bass, even had horn parts written out if he had a horn section, that sort of thing. But very, very sharp when it came to the ins and outs of how to read and write music.
That's pretty amazing.
Yeah, it's a lost art form almost these days. I mean, it's not required like it was as much. He learned from a wonderful piano player when he was a young guy out of high school. And so he picked it up as like a second language, and he understood it completely. Then he could just write it out. I mean, above and below the staff, it was impressive to watch him do it. It's quite an art form itself, seeing somebody who can just write like that. By knowing where the notes were, how to place them and what key you were in by how many sharps or flats there were. He could answer all that. He knew all that information. Like I said, I was like, keep it simple. I was a bass player. I wasn't trying to get into anything too heady, but I should have asked. And then I spent most of my life trying to learn all that knowledge that he had long after he had passed, because I spend most of my time playing guitar now, whether it's songwriting or whatever. And these acoustic shows, it's all guitar.
Yeah. Do you feel like the playing with acoustic guitar versus bass, that you're more in touch with the song, or do you feel more in touch with it when you're playing the bass? Which way is it?
Well, it's one is the rhythm section, which is the core of the song,
Mm-hmm.
So there is that. And then you put singing on top of that, it becomes really interesting. A lot of people can't do it just because they haven't done it. I started at such an early age, I didn't know you couldn't do it, but keeping the rhythm section together and singing lead is a crazy thing. You don't see a lot of it. Paul McCartney does it well, and Sting does it really well, but you don't see a lot of people doing that. It's which is really different. When I came to town, nobody in Nashville was doing it. People weren't sure what was happening. Bass players singing lead. I don't even know if that's legal in Tennessee. It's like, but but it is fun. I really enjoy it. I really like playing bass. It's something I've always done. And then, as far as writing, I have written a couple songs. No More Crying, that song from 8 Seconds. I wrote that on bass because it has a real little feet. And all I had on the bus that day was a bass. So I wrote the bass line first, and kind of helped create that song for me. So you kind of use what you have, when you're in a situation where you feel creative. I just picked that bass up because it's what I had. But for writing songs, I love electric, I love acoustic. That's a whole different thing, And of course, my solo shows, I control the tempo and everything, whatever I want to do, because there's no band. I can be Willie Nelson. I can sing out of time, whatever the heck I want to do. But it's fun. I've become a much better player over the years. I've really worked hard. I should be much better than I am, the amount of time, Joe, that I've spent on it. But I do enjoy it. And people think that I'm a good player. I'm an okay player. I can get through all of my songs and some intros and outros and all the stuff that's needed, so the audience will recognize the tune, but I do enjoy it. After all these years, I still work hard at it and still enjoy showing up and singing and playing and looking forward to this show up in Greenfield.
All right. Well, I'll let you get back to the rest of your life. You've probably got some other interviews, songwriting sessions, I wish I could have the Zoom just running when you're in there with Pat Moynihan. That'd be really cool. But
I hope that holds up next week. It's interesting. A young guy at his office has been a fan of my songwriting. And so he works for a big company out in California, Malibu, and they have offices in New York, and they handle a lot of big clients. Pat Train's one of them. Miley Cyrus is one of them. They sort of manage their songwriting publishing side of it, I guess, is what they're doing. But it's interesting. He just reached out to my agent, and we started this conversation. So I've never met Pat, but I'm certainly looking forward to it. I'm a fan. He's such a great singer. And
Oh yeah, I mean,
I've heard him.
I love Train. Save Me San Francisco is one of my favorites.
Oh, cool. Yes.
So that's really cool. That's going to be fun for you. I'm jealous.
I don't know if he wants to write country songs or what's happening, but we'll figure it out, you know.
Right. Yeah. Well, I will. I'm looking forward to seeing you on January 24th and meeting you in person and playing some music.
Oh, likewise, Joe. Thanks for having me on today. I appreciate it. All the listeners, thanks for tuning in, and come on out and see us. You know, January 24th is coming up now. I mean, we've been talking about this date for a while, but it's really almost around the corner. So there are some seats left, obviously, but we've been fortunate that some people have bought some tickets already, and we're looking forward to a fun time that night.
Yep. Thanks for being on the show. I really, really appreciate it, and we'll talk to you soon.
Okay, Joe. Thanks so much, man. See you soon.
Moonshine and Music is produced by Joe Shelton. Our cameraman, grip, and stunt double is Brent Lee Smith. Artwork by Bailey Shelton. Production crew, Patrick Zabriskie, Ray Hoskins, and special thanks to the Owens family. Also thanks to the H.J. Ricks Center for the Arts, Tony Seiler and Heather Warren staff for all of their assistance in our National Road Music Series shows. Moonshine and Music is copyright 2025, all rights reserved. Hope to see you next time on Moonshine and Music.